In today's video, we're going to look at brandishing firearms laws. And we'll also explore to see if you're making innocent mistakes that may get you thrown into jail or not. But right after the channel intro. Remember, only you can ensure you and your family's survival. Live your life with honor and integrity, and always be the wolf hunter. Don't be the sheep, and never be the wolf. So as a firearms instructor and also a police officer, I've seen and heard many comments from many people on brandishing firearm laws, both in real life and also in comments left on my videos. And it's evident from these comments that there are a lot of people out there who have a lot of misconceptions about what the law typically considers brandishing a firearm. Now first I want to point out that each state has its own laws. So make sure that you research your own state's laws regarding firearms and self-defense. Because what I'm going to talk about is how the brandishing law is generally used across the United States. So by knowing what's legal and not legal in your own state, this allows you to make your own informed decisions that will help you the best. Also, when I mention about carrying a firearm in this video, I'll be referring to people who can legally carry firearms in public in the area that they live in. And also please know that I'm not giving legal advice here. I'm just giving you some things to consider so again you can make your own informed decisions after you have researched the laws in your area. But just for an example about misconceptions about brandishing a firearm, I recently had a subscriber leave a comment where he stated that he believed that open carrying was better than concealed carry because he was under the belief that if a person carried concealed and if the concealed gun accidentally showed, or even if the clothing printed the firearm, then the concealed carrier could be arrested for brandishing a firearm. Now I'm not knocking the person who left that comment. I don't know where he got his information from, and I don't know his state laws. But I think that more than likely that person was fed bad information about the brandishing law in his state. And here's another example. I have a relative that works in a sporting goods store, and this store sells all kinds of outdoor gear, and it also sells firearms. Now, while the store has employees with firearms knowledge working the firearms department, the store manager, who oversees the whole store, believed that the simple act of somebody removing their firearm inside of the store to test out a new holster for that firearm, that this simple act of removing a firearm from one holster to try it into a new holster would be considered against the law and be considered brandishing that firearm. Basically, this store manager believed that if you removed your handgun from your holster to try it out on a new holster, then you could be arrested and booked into jail for brandishing a firearm. Now obviously I hope that anybody that's removing a firearm to try it out on a new holster would hopefully do it with an unloaded gun. But let's stick with the subject of this video, which is what the law generally says about brandishing firearms. So now let's also get this out of the way. Not every state will call it brandishing. Some states will refer to it as unlawful display or improper exhibition of a firearm. But no matter what state you live in and no matter what your state calls it, states will typically say that what makes it brandishing is because you showed it in a way to somebody else to intentionally threaten or harass that person. So let me repeat that. In most states, you'll only be considered brandishing a weapon if you intentionally show a weapon to someone in order to threaten that person. Also, a lot of states usually have it written into their laws that somebody needs to knowingly or intentionally, or at least carelessly or recklessly, commit the act before they can be charged with the crime. So just to give an example of knowingly or intentionally, let's say that I'm a taxi driver, and let's say that my last rider accidentally left his briefcase in the back floorboard of my taxi. And let's say that briefcase was full of dope. So while technically I'm illegally possessing drugs in that scenario, luckily by the letter of the law I cannot be charged with possession of drugs because I am not knowingly or intentionally possessing them. So, for most states, for you to be charged with brandishing a firearm, you need to have that firearm and do something with it that shows that you are intentionally trying to intimidate or threaten somebody else with it. So let's do a couple of examples, and for these examples I'm going to be using my red training gun to simulate concealed carry. But let's say that you're in a store and you're being rung up by a cashier, and when you reach for your wallet, you accidentally show your gun that's in your waistband. Now this is a case where you would not be arrested for brandishing because you didn't do anything else to threaten that cashier. There were no actions on your part that would show that you conveyed that you were threatening to hurt the cashier with your firearm. Even if the cashier was a liberal anti-gunner and called the cops on you and said that he or she was threatened by the mere presence of your gun, the cops will not be able to legally arrest you because you didn't do any actions that conveyed to the cashier that you were going to harm them with your firearm. And now let's do another example. Let's say that you get into a verbal confrontation with somebody else in a store over the last item on a store shelf. Now for this example, I'm talking about a verbal argument only, where there's no deadly threats being made. You two are just doing a lot of yelling and name calling. But let's say during your verbal back and forth that you open your jacket and you point toward your firearm. You know, point towards it where you're non-verbally saying, "You better watch out because I'm armed." Now, by doing something like that, now you face being arrested for brandishing a firearm because now you've threatened that person by showing that you have a deadly weapon on you and that you may use it. Especially since this verbal-only, non-violent encounter didn't justify the use of deadly force or even threatening to use deadly force. And here's another example. Let's say that you're driving down the road and you get into a road rage incident with another driver. And I'm not talking about the type of road rage where anybody is actually doing anything deadly. You two are just zipping past each other and doing the occasional brake check. So let's say during this road rage you pull your firearm and wave it just to show that you have it and to make the other driver back off. Again, this is another example where you very well could end up being charged with brandishing a firearm because you've displayed that firearm to threaten or intimidate another person. Now, of course, if you're facing a situation that's rapidly becoming deadly and you display a firearm and it causes the bad guys to flee, then you're probably not going to be charged with brandishing a firearm. Now remember, I'm not saying that it's this way for every county or state in the United States. There's always exceptions to every rule. You could always have somebody see your gun and then make a false accusation against you just to try to get you into trouble. But what I'm talking about here is how it's generally going to be in most of the areas across the United States. So just remember, most states' laws regarding brandishing a firearm is that you knowingly or intentionally display or exhibit your firearm in such a way to intentionally threaten or harass or intimidate another person. So again, just simply having a legal firearm on your hip and somebody seeing it doesn't mean that you're going to be arrested for brandishing. Or if you simply take your firearm, and hopefully a firearm that you've made safe, but simply taking your firearm out of your holster to try it out on another holster in a store, again, doesn't mean you're going to be arrested either. The only way you should be arrested for doing that is if you make some kind of an unwarranted threat to somebody else while you've got your firearm out. So again, folks, I'm not saying it's this way in every state across the United States, but I'm going to ask you this. If you comment saying that you can be arrested for brandishing a legally carried firearm just because you removed it from its holster, or just because somebody sees it on your hip or sees the print of it in your clothing, then I'm going to ask you to post that law from your state saying so. Doing this does a couple of things. It encourages you to research your own state's laws. And then if you find that it does actually allow for you to be arrested for brandishing a weapon without actually intentionally threatening somebody with it, then it allows for other people from your state to read your comment and learn from it also. And for the subscribers to this community that live outside of the United States, I know that guns are generally not as prevalent in your countries. But do me a favor and tell us what your laws are regarding brandishing weapons in your country is, whether the weapon be an edged weapon or a club or something else. Okay folks, like I almost always end my videos with, there's always a million more points that could be made about open carry versus concealed carry or other self-defense laws or whatever. But remember, I'm trying to stick to the subject of brandishing firearms here in order to keep this video at a reasonable length of time. So please share your thoughts and past life experiences on brandishing weapons so we can all learn from each other. Anyways folks, if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I pray that you have a good night.